Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is revised in state, church, and community education. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the whole issue of how certain elements within public education and private education can be revised is the professor of philosophy at Tennessee State University, Dr. William H. Hardy. And of course, Dr. Hardy, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haney, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And to tell you how delighted, Dr. Hardy, we are for having you here today. As we indicated earlier, that what we'd like to do more than anything is to talk about public, church, and community education. And
yes.
Of course, you've got a lot of information in reference to that. And you've made a tremendous contribution in reference to that. And that's why we wanted to talk to you.
Yes.
But Dr. Hardy, before we get into that, let's talk about Dr. William H. Hardy. And to have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important and eventually motivating you to become involved in this new approach, this new philosophy dealing with higher education and public education and church education.
Yes. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm just pleased to share the information with you and with your audience on this day. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, originally. And I, of course, was educated in the Indianapolis public school system. And from Indianapolis, I then went to Central State University, a historically black school in Wilberforce, Ohio. And then from there, I went to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and received well, first of all, the earlier degree was in political science at Central State. And then I followed that by getting a master's degree at Johns Hopkins University in urban politics, and then eventually to Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I had a master's of divinity there, and went on to become ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and then eventually got my doctorate in theology at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. And I've been teaching at Tennessee State University now for 14 years, and I'm an associate professor in philosophy and religious studies.
You know, I think in a real sense, your career sort of mirrors this search in terms of state, church, community kind of education, and certainly we're delighted to have you here, and we want to get a lot of information in reference to that. But looking at your topic this morning, Dr. Hardy, one of the things that we indicated to our guests, to our audience this morning, was that we wanted to talk about revising church, state, and community education.
Right.
But before we revise it, let's look at and have you to sort of look at those elements and analyze where we are and where we've been before we move into what you'd like to present to us this morning.
I think it's probably significant that my education mirrors what we have been talking about, and that is that the Indianapolis public school system was an all-black system and an all-white system when I was a young fella in that elementary, middle, and high school system. And so then, and I did bring with me a couple of examples. We'll talk about that later. But the school system was a dual system for a while. And then the school system integrated in 1957. Although the 1954 Supreme Court decision said that all schools across the country were to be integrated. But Indianapolis was a bit slow like many cities and urban programs across the country. Then, of course, integration came. I became an active person in the NAACP in those days. I was part of the NAACP youth program, joined the youth council there, and then eventually went to work for the NAACP in New York City before I, in between those times of getting my education. So I worked for Roy Wilkins, and so I do know something about that system, as you were saying, where we integrated a number of schools across the country. But I worked for the NAACP from 1965 to 1969.
Hot times.
And certainly, yes, that was part of the movement. Then from 1976 to 1979, I was the executive director of the NAACP in Chicago. So those experiences gave me a good idea of what was happening in education at that time. So we now want to look at what was happening with the dual system at that time, And then how did the system change? And then what do we have now? And how might we then look at revising that?
Very good. And of course, we're getting ready for our first commercial break here, Dr. Hardy. But when we come back, and we've got about 20 seconds before that, but when we come back, we want you to give us that kind of information, and at the same time, as much information as you could possibly bring in dealing with our young people. You know,
I certainly will.
direct,
I brought with me to my props. There's the white doll and the black doll. And when we come back, I'll be glad to talk about what's going on.
Very good. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. The topic this morning